Two cops pulled me out of my car, put my face on the pavement because I have a car that don't belong to people like me. Their sergeant was shocked when he saw me. I bought my car 3 months ago. It was a matte black luxury sedan that cost more than most people make in 2 years. I paid for it in cash with money I earned over 12 years as an orthopedic surgeon. I specialized in sports injuries and had clients who played professional basketball and football. I worked 16-hour days for over a decade. I missed holidays and birthdays and weddings. I earned every dollar that paid for that car. None of that mattered to the 2 officers who pulled me over on a Tuesday evening in my own neighborhood. I was driving home from the hospital after a 9-hour surgery. I was tired. I was hungry. I was 3 blocks from my house. The police car appeared behind me with no sirens, just lights. I pulled over immediately, because that's what you do. I put my hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen because that's what my father taught me. I waited for the officer to approach because that's what keeps you alive. The officer didn't approach. Instead, I heard doors open and close. I heard footsteps on both sides of my car. I heard the click of weapons being drawn. A voice shouted at me to put my hands out the window. I did. Another voice shouted at me to open the door from the outside. I did. A hand grabbed my collar and pulled me out of the car. My face hit the pavement before I could process what was happening. A knee pressed into my back. Hands patted me down roughly. A voice near my ear said they finally caught one of these guys. The other officer was already going through my car. He was opening the glove compartment, checking under the seats, looking in the trunk. He said he was searching for weapons and stolen goods. I asked what I was being stopped for. The officer on my back said I knew exactly what I was being stopped for. He said cars like mine didn't belong to people like me. He said they had been getting reports of luxury vehicles being stolen from the west side and driven through this neighborhood. He said I matched the profile. I asked what profile that was. He pressed his knee harder into my spine and told me to stop talking. The other officer came back from searching my car. He had my registration and insurance in his hand. He said the paperwork looked real, but these days anyone could fake documents. He said they needed to take me in for further questioning. He said the car would be impounded until they could verify ownership. I told them my name. I told them I was a doctor. I told them I lived 3 blocks away. The officer on my back laughed and said criminals always had stories. He said I probably stole the car from some rich doctor and was trying to use his identity. He said they'd sort it all out at the station. That's when another police car pulled up. A sergeant got out. He was an older man with a calm expression. He walked toward us slowly, looking at the scene. He looked at me on the ground. He looked at my car with the doors open. He looked at the 2 officers, one with his knee on my back and one holding my paperwork. He asked what was going on. The standing officer said they caught someone driving a suspected stolen vehicle. He said I was being uncooperative. He said I claimed to be a doctor but was probably lying. The sergeant looked at me again. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said my name. He said it like a question at first, then again like a statement. He asked the officer to let me up. The officer on my back hesitated. The sergeant said it again, more firmly. Let her up, now. The officer removed his knee and stepped back. I stood up slowly. My shirt was torn. My face was scraped from the pavement. My hands were shaking. The sergeant walked over to me and asked if I was okay. I said I would be fine. He turned to the 2 officers and asked if they knew who I was. They said they didn't, and it didn't matter because I was driving a suspicious vehicle. The sergeant told them I was his neighbor. He told them I had lived on his street for 4 years. He told them I was the surgeon who operated on his son's torn ligament last spring and saved his college basketball scholarship. He told them I drove that same car past his house every single day. The officers went quiet. I caught their names on their badges for the first time now that I was standing. The one who had been on my back was Lancelot Romano. The one who searched my car was Cliff Belmont. Lancelot said they were just following protocol. He said luxury vehicles were being stolen in the area. He said they had to be cautious. The sergeant, whose name was Branson Grant, asked what protocol involved putting a respected physician face down on the pavement without even checking her identification first. He asked why they searched my car without my consent. He asked why they had their weapons drawn for a routine traffic stop. He asked what exactly I had done to justify this treatment besides driving a nice car in my own neighborhood. The officers couldn't answer. Branson turned to Lancelot and Cliff and told them to wait by their cruiser. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. They walked back slowly, and Branson led me to the back of my car, out of earshot. He told me to tell him exactly what happened from the moment I saw their lights. I told him everything. Every word they said. Every hand that grabbed me. The knee pressing into my back. The search without my permission. The line about people like me. Branson's jaw got tight. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he looked at the scrapes on my face and the torn collar of my shirt. He said he was calling this in tonight. He told me not to wash my shirt, not to touch the scrapes on my face, and to take photos when I got inside. He said this wasn't going to just disappear. I believed him, but I also knew how these things usually went. What I didn't know yet was that Branson had pushed through a body camera policy last year, and both Lancelot and Cliff were wearing theirs. Branson walked back toward the 2 officers. I stayed by my car and watched. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see it. He wasn't yelling. His voice looked low and even, and somehow that made it worse than if he'd been screaming. His hands were at his sides. His shoulders were square. He was talking the way a man talks when he doesn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Lancelot didn't take it well. He started gesturing, pointing back at my car, then pointing at me. Cliff was different. Cliff stayed quiet, staring at the ground with his arms crossed, not looking at Branson and not looking at Lancelot. At one point, Lancelot's voice got loud enough that I caught a few words, something about protocol and reports and just doing their jobs. Branson held up one hand, just one hand, palm out, steady. Lancelot stopped mid-sentence. I'd never seen someone shut down that fast with just a hand. Branson said something else I couldn't hear, and both officers stayed where they were while he walked back to me. He told me I was free to go. He said he was documenting everything tonight, and this was not going to be something that got swept under a rug. He told me to take photos of my face, my shirt, and my car before I went inside. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice right then. I got back in my car and drove the 3 blocks home. I pulled into my driveway and turned the engine off and just sat there. I didn't get out. I didn't move. I sat in my car in my own driveway for 10 minutes without moving a muscle. My hands were still shaking. Not a lot, but enough that I could see it. I'm a surgeon. My hands are everything. I use them to cut and stitch and rebuild things that are broken inside people's bodies. And right now they were shaking because 2 men with badges decided I was a criminal based on the color of my skin and the price of my car. I took the photos. I used my phone and took pictures of my face, my shirt, and my car from every angle. I sent every photo to myself so there'd be a timestamp in my email. Then I called my father. I called Zephyrus. He picked up on the second ring. That was the thing about Zephyrus. He always picked up. I told him what happened. I tried to keep my voice steady. I told him about the lights, the stop, the hands on my collar, the pavement, the knee, the search, the words. I told him about Lancelot saying cars like mine didn't belong to people like me. I told him about Cliff going through my car and saying my documents could be faked. I told him about Branson showing up. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Zephyrus said, "Tell me you kept your hands where they could see them." I said I did. I had them on the steering wheel, then out the window, just like he taught me. He said good. And then his voice got quiet. He said that's why I was calling him and not the other way around. His voice cracked on that last word. Just a little. Just enough that I heard it. My father was not a man who cracked. He was a man who taught me how to survive traffic stops when I was 15 years old. He was a man who sat me down in the living room and made me practice where to put my hands, how to speak, what words to use, what words not to use. And hearing his voice break told me everything about what he was feeling. He cleared his throat. He told me to file a complaint tomorrow, first thing. He said I shouldn't let this one go. I told him I was thinking about it, but I didn't know if it was worth the trouble. I said I just wanted to move on. Zephyrus was quiet for a second. Then he said that was exactly what they were counting on. That I was too tired, that I was too busy, that I was too important to make noise. He said that's how they kept doing it, year after year, because people like me decided it wasn't worth the fight. He told me to file it. Not for me. For the next person who doesn't have a sergeant living on their street. For the next woman driving home from work who doesn't have a neighbor who knows her name. He said to do it for her because she's out there, and those two officers are still wearing their badges. I didn't say anything for a while. He was right. The part of me that was tired and hurt and just wanted to shower and sleep was loud, but the part of me that heard Lancelot say people like me was louder. I said okay. I told him I'd go tomorrow, first thing. He told me to put ice on my face and try to get some sleep. He said he loved me. I said I loved him too. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my dining table with my laptop and typed out every detail I could remember while it was still raw. By morning I had 4 pages. I also had a text from Branson saying he'd pulled the body camera footage and it confirmed everything I described. He said both officers were already on notice. But Branson also warned me that Lancelot had filed his own report first, claiming I was aggressive and non-compliant. That changed things. Now it wasn't just about what happened. It was about what they were willing to lie about. And if Lancelot was going to put lies in writing, I needed to be ready with the truth. I spent the next hour going through Lancelot's report line by line after my lawyer sent it over. In his report, I was speeding. I wasn't speeding. I was going the speed limit on a residential street 3 blocks from my house after a 9-hour surgery. I was barely awake. In his report, I refused to show my hands when they approached the vehicle. I didn't refuse anything. My hands were on the steering wheel exactly where Zephyrus taught me to put them. In his report, I lunged when they opened my door. I didn't lunge. I was pulled out of my car by my collar. My face hit the pavement because someone's hand dragged me out of my seat and threw me down. Every single line was a lie. Every single lie was written in a way that made his actions seem reasonable. It wasn't just that he lied. It was how carefully he lied. He chose words that made it sound like I was dangerous. He chose words that made it sound like he had no choice. He turned a woman driving home from saving someone's life into a threat that had to be handled with force. Reading someone else's made-up version of the worst night of your life is something I don't know how to describe. It's right there in front of you, in official language, on official paper, filed in an official system. It's someone rewriting your life and filing it as fact. And if those cameras hadn't been rolling, that report would be the truth. Not because it was true, but because it was the only version anyone would ever see. The next morning, I drove to the precinct. I had my 4 pages printed out, my phone full of photos, and the torn shirt in a bag on my passenger seat. I walked in and went straight to the front desk. The officer behind the counter looked at the scrape on my cheekbone, then at my collar, which I hadn't changed on purpose. I told her I needed to file a formal complaint. She brought me a clipboard and sat across from me. She read my statement, went through my photos one by one, her face getting more still with each swipe. She asked if there were witnesses. I said Sergeant Branson Grant arrived on scene and saw everything. She took it all down and said someone from Internal Affairs would be in contact. That's when I saw Cliff walking through the hallway behind the desk. He turned his head and saw me standing there and just stopped. Something crossed his face that wasn't anger or toughness. It looked like fear, the kind you see on someone's face when they realize they might have done something they can't undo. He didn't say a word. He turned the other direction and disappeared around a corner. That afternoon, Branson called. He said he'd read Lancelot's report. His voice was tight. He said Lancelot's report claimed I was driving erratically, refused to show my hands, and made threatening statements during the stop. He said none of it matched the body camera footage. He said I pulled over immediately. My hands were on the wheel. I was calm and compliant the entire time. He said Lancelot didn't know he'd already submitted the footage to Internal Affairs. He said Lancelot thought this was going to be his word against mine. It wasn't. I asked Branson why he was putting himself in the middle of it. He said I put his son's knee back together and gave Colton his scholarship back, but that wasn't why he was doing it. He said he was doing it because he watched 2 of his officers treat a woman like a criminal for driving home. He said that was the whole reason, and he didn't need another one. My lawyer, who my friend Safia from medical school connected me with, filed the formal complaint with Internal Affairs attaching my photos, my written timeline, and a request for the body camera footage. The Internal Affairs review was scheduled for Friday. Thursday evening, Branson knocked on my front door, out of uniform. He told me Lancelot had been talking to other officers in the precinct, telling people I was a difficult resident with a history of problems with police. He said Lancelot was trying to make it look like Branson was covering for a friend instead of holding 2 officers accountable. I asked if any of that changed what was on the footage. Branson said no, the footage was the footage. But he warned me that if Lancelot could make enough officers doubt the complaint, the review board might go easy. A written warning instead of suspension or termination. A written warning meant nothing. It meant they were back on the street doing the same thing to someone else. Some other woman driving home in a nice car. Some other person who doesn't have somebody like Branson living next door. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said he just wanted me to know what was happening in there so I wasn't walking in blind tomorrow. I thanked him. He nodded and left. I stood in my hallway after he was gone. man, staring at the closed door. Lancelot wasn't just trying to get away with what he did. He was trying to make me the problem. He was going around telling people I was difficult, that I had a history, that I was the kind of person who brought this on herself. He was doing to my reputation what he did to my face on that pavement, grinding it into the dirt. Friday morning I got dressed. Button-down shirt, no tie. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I also wasn't going to walk in there looking like I didn't care. I went out to my driveway. My car was sitting there. The same matte black sedan. The same car that started all of this. The same car I bought with money I earned over 12 years of cutting people open and putting them back together. I got in and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. I thought about Zephyrus. I thought about what he said on the phone that night. Not for you. For the next person who doesn't have a sergeant living on their street. I thought about that person. Some woman I'd never meet. Driving home some future Tuesday night. Turning onto some quiet street where a police car would appear behind her with no sirens. Just lights. Some woman who would do everything right. Hands on the wheel. Voice calm. Body still. And it still wouldn't be enough. That's who I was doing this for. I started the car. I drove to the precinct and walked inside. The internal affairs review room was smaller than I expected. A long table for the 4-person panel. 2 chairs for the officers. 1 chair for me. My lawyer was beside me. Branson was in the hallway waiting to be called. Lancelot was already seated, back straight, jaw set, looking like a man who believed he was about to be proven right. Cliff sat next to him but with a gap between their chairs that felt intentional. The panel lead read Lancelot's report out loud, slowly. Suspect driving erratically. Suspect refused to comply. Suspect made aggressive movements. Every sentence described someone dangerous. Lancelot sat there nodding along like a man hearing scripture. When the panel lead finished, he asked Lancelot if he stood by every detail. Lancelot didn't hesitate. He said, "Yes, sir, 100%. Then the panel lead read my statement, and the room heard a completely different night. Hands on the steering wheel. Immediate compliance. Pulled from the car by my collar. Face pushed into pavement. Identified myself as a doctor and was called a liar. Car searched without consent. Told that cars like mine didn't belong to people like me." The panel lead set both statements side by side. Then he said they had one more piece of evidence to review. He turned on a monitor. Body camera footage. The room went silent. On the screen you could see my car. Pulled over. Hazards blinking. You could see my hands come out the window. Both of them. Fingers spread. You could hear my voice. Calm. Saying, "What did I do wrong, officer?" There was no erratic driving. No refusal to comply. No aggressive movement. What there was, clear as anything, was Lancelot's hand reaching into my car and grabbing my collar. You could hear the sound my face made when it hit the pavement. A dull, flat smack. You could hear Lancelot say, "We finally caught one of these guys." You could hear Cliff in the background going through my car. You could hear me saying my name, saying I was a doctor, saying I lived 3 blocks away. And you could hear Lancelot, knee on my back, saying criminals always had stories. Every second of the footage was the exact opposite of every line in Lancelot's report. The panel lead let it play all the way through. When it ended, he turned the monitor off. I looked at Lancelot. His face was changing. His jaw loosened. His shoulders dropped. His back curved forward. His eyes went from the dark screen to the table to his own hands. He opened his mouth and said he didn't know the cameras were. And then he stopped, mid-sentence. The panel lead leaned forward and asked him to finish. Lancelot closed his mouth. He stared at the table. That's when Cliff spoke for the first time. He said he wanted to make a separate statement. He said Lancelot told him to follow his lead before the stop. He said Lancelot claimed the car was flagged and matched a stolen vehicle report. He said it wasn't flagged. He checked after they got back to the station and ran the plate. There was no report matching that vehicle. He said Lancelot made the stop because of how the driver looked and nothing else. He said he went along with it and he shouldn't have. Lancelot turned to Cliff so fast his chair scraped the floor. He asked what Cliff was doing. Cliff looked straight at him and said he was telling the truth, something Lancelot should have done 3 days ago. The panel lead called Branson in. Branson gave his statement in uniform, hands at his sides. He said he'd lived next to me for 4 years. He said I was a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. He said I repaired his son Colton's torn ligament and saved his college basketball scholarship. He said when he arrived on scene he found a respected physician face down on the pavement with a knee in her back and her car ransacked without her consent. He said there was no probable cause for the stop, no erratic driving, no matching stolen vehicle report, no justification of any kind. Then he looked at the panel and said he pushed for body cameras because he believed transparency would protect good officers. He said today it did something else. It protected a good woman from 2 bad officers. The panel lead said they had seen enough. He said Lancelot was suspended immediately, effective right now, pending formal termination proceedings. He listed the charges: excessive force, unlawful search, racial profiling, falsifying an official report, 4 charges, each enough on its own, all 4 together meaning Lancelot's career was over. He told Cliff he would face a separate review, but his cooperation and honesty would be factored in. Lancelot stood up. His chair hit the wall behind him. He pointed at me and said I ruined his career. I looked back at him. My face still had the yellow-green shadow of a bruise on my cheekbone from where he put it on the pavement. I said no. He did that the moment he decided what I was before he knew who I was. I stood up. I shook my lawyer's hand. I walked out of the room. Branson was waiting in the hallway. He put a hand on my shoulder, steady and solid. He said Colton asked about me yesterday. He said to tell me thanks for everything. I nodded. I walked through the precinct lobby and pushed through the front door into the sunlight. My car was right there. The same matte black sedan that started all of this. I got in. I put my hands on the steering wheel. I thought about Zephyrus's voice cracking on the phone. I thought about the next person he told me about. The woman who didn't have a Branson on her street. I hoped what happened today made her road a little safer. I started the car and drove home. 3 blocks. The same 3 blocks. But this time, for the first time, I didn't check my mirrors.